Hi there, my name is Liv Williamson and I am a fourth-year PhD student in the Coral Reef Futures Lab here at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science. Did you know that corals can reproduce both asexually and sexually? This means that they can make new corals not only by cloning themselves, but also by producing new babies. Corals are animals belonging to the phylum Cnidaria, which means that they're related to jellyfish and anemones. When you look closely at a coral, you can see this resemblance. Corals are made up of individual polyps, an animal with a mouth surrounded by a ring of tentacles. These polyps bud off from one another, but actually stay attached at the base to form colonies of attached, genetically identical individual polyps. Each of the polyps that you see on a colony are essentially clones of one another. This is the process of asexual reproduction, where more units are created without creating new genetic diversity. If a colony breaks, all of the individual pieces can continue to survive and grow and keep forming new colonies, but all of those pieces will still have the same genetic information of that original colony. This technique is widely used in coral restoration efforts, where corals are gardened by fragmenting them, growing out all of those different fragments, and then outplanting them to a reef environment. To create new genetic diversity, corals also reproduce sexually, meaning that eggs and sperm from two different parent colonies can combine to form new, genetically unique offspring. The way they do this is pretty amazing to witness. On just a few nights a year, all of the corals of a given species on a reef coordinate with one another to release their eggs and sperm all at the same time. This is a process called coral spawning. Corals use cues from the environment, including the lunar cycle and water temperature, to perfectly time the release of their gametes, their eggs and their sperm. Most species spawn a few nights after the full moon during the summer months. Another fascinating thing about corals is that many are hermaphrodites. This means that a single colony, and sometimes even a single polyp, can produce both male and female gametes, both eggs and sperm. When they spawn, they release little packets of eggs and sperm bundled together, which slowly float to the ocean surface. At the surface, these bundles of eggs and sperm break apart so that they can fertilize the eggs and sperm released by other colonies. Other corals are called gonochores, meaning that they are either male or female and produce either eggs or sperm, not both. No matter how the eggs and sperm are released, the result of this fertilization are millions of tiny new coral larvae. These amoeba-like little pink baby corals are part of the plankton, meaning that they're among the small organisms that drift around in the water column. These babies really don't look at all like their parents yet. They look like little round blobs covered in cilia or hairs, which beat to help them move through the water. Coral larvae swim around in the water for days to weeks, searching for a place on the seafloor where they can settle or permanently attach. They use chemical cues from other organisms on the reef, including other corals and algae, as well as sometimes even sound cues to pick up on where is going to be a good environment for them to permanently attach themselves to the seafloor. Once they find the perfect spot, they form a mouth and tentacles and start to secrete a limestone skeleton that attaches them permanently to the seafloor. Now they're officially part of the reef, and these juvenile corals are typically called recruits. These recruits start off quite small, sometimes only the size of a grain of sand. This means that there are a lot of things in the ocean that are a lot bigger than them and can outcompete or prey upon them. Unfortunately, a large proportion of these tiny coral recruits don't make it to adulthood because a snail grazes over them, or a piece of algae grows on top of them, or something else causes them to die. A few, though, through a combination of luck and toughness, do survive long enough to become their own colonies on the reef. These start as a single polyp, but then slowly over time start to bud off from one another, asexually reproducing to form bigger and bigger and bigger colonies. Eventually, after a few years or decades, this colony might be big enough to start reproducing or spawning on its own, and then the process starts all over again. Scientists have begun to be very focused on this process of coral sexual reproduction because it generates a lot of new genetic diversity all at once. And the reefs really need new genetic diversity right now. Coral reefs here in Florida, as well as around the world, are declining rapidly because of human-caused climate change and other local stressors such as disease, pollution, and overfishing. Coastal communities around the world rely on coral reef ecosystems for livelihoods, seafood, protection from waves and erosion, and tourism. As such, scientists and managers are racing to try to find ways to keep corals from declining so that we can preserve the crucial ecosystem services that they provide for us. An essential component of coral reef restoration and conservation going forward will be ensuring the success of coral spawning events and ensuring the survival of coral juveniles so that we can keep adding new genetic diversity to these reefs that are declining. This will make the population as a whole stronger going forward and able to adapt more to change. My PhD research here at the University of Miami and the work of many scientists around the world is focused on optimizing the processes of coral sexual reproduction and ensuring the survival of coral babies so that we can make sure the reefs of the future will be very genetically diverse and robust and resilient. If you're interested in learning more, here are lots of organizations that are involved in this work. I encourage you to reach out, do some research, read, learn, talk to people, and overall advocate for the future of coral reefs. Thank you so much for listening.